Make it better? Can we make it a bit more inclusive?
Either we're going to have a homophobic curriculum or not.
It was a big issue in the provincial election, what kids learn about sex ed in the classroom. And now it's before the courts. Groups against the sex ed repeal say the government's reversal of the modernized curriculum is unlawful, while the province wants the case to be dismissed. Lorenda Redekop with what happened in the courtroom today.
Changes to sex ed teaching has sparked anger and protests, and today the issue headed to court.
We had a homophobic curriculum for many years in many provinces across Canada. It finally got updated in Ontario recently, and then the new government changed it, and now they're using a curriculum literally from another century.
The Canadian Civil Liberties Association argues the government puts some students at risk by taking out any teaching on same-sex relationships or consent, particularly endangering LGBTQ students and girls.
When governments act contrary to the needs and rights of its citizens, then court cases like ours are absolutely necessary.
Sex ed classes also no longer teach the youngest students the anatomical names for their body parts. Plus, the government initially started a snitch line people could call if teachers stuck with the 2015 curriculum.
The government's mishandling of the health and physical education curriculum has had a chilling effect on teachers' abilities to teach the curriculum in an equitable, diverse, and inclusive way. And this will have a detrimental impact on students and their ability to make safe choices.
In court today, union lawyers said this isn't a case about the curriculum itself, but the government's motivation for the switch, citing words used by the PCs when talking about the previous curriculum, including in the throne speech.
And replacing failed ideological experiments in the classroom.
The three judges questioned these examples. One called it hot air people hear from politicians, but not necessarily a legal issue. The government wants this whole case dismissed and says sex ed will be based on the world kids live in.
But obviously things like sexting and texting and bullying, these remain very, very important.
Tomorrow, the lawyers for the government will present their case. It's unknown exactly when the three-judge panel will release its ruling. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Vic Fedeli has served former PC leader Patrick Brown and his publisher with a notice of intent to sue over statements in Brown's recent book that a political staffer had accused Fedeli of sexual misconduct.
My first reaction, of course, what a hypocrite.
That's how Brown described his reaction when Fedeli later became interim party leader after Brown himself faced sexual misconduct allegations and resigned. Brown is now mayor of Brampton. Fedeli's notice demands a retraction and an apology. Brown said in a text message that he finds that, quote, perplexing, as the CBC has already independently verified that a complaint was indeed made. Now, in the book, Brown says the woman didn't want an investigation and that her allegations were never tested in court. We're learning more about the two people found dead in an apartment building on Birchmount south of St. Clair. Police say a 40-year-old woman was found on the ground outside the building. A 30-year-old woman was found inside an 8th-floor apartment. Now, investigators have not released the causes of the deaths or the relationship between the two people, but they say they are considering this a possible murder-suicide. And a woman died in one of their donation clothing bins. Now the company that makes it and others like it are trying to make sure that it never happens again. We'll have that story for you coming up at 6:30. According to a new report, Airbnb has drained nearly 6,500 homes from the city's rental supply. And if those units were put back in the housing market, vacancy rates in Toronto would double. Farah Morelli joins us now live with more on this. And Farah, the coalition behind this is calling on Airbnb to remove those thousands of listings.
It is, Dwight. They say that if Airbnb had followed the City of Toronto's original regulations on short-term rentals, thousands of these homes would have to be removed from the site. The coalition behind this report is called Fairbnb. They're an organization that has the support of the hotel industry's main union, and it's for that reason, in part, that Airbnb is dismissing this report altogether.
Amenities, hardwood floor, amazing.
At OCAD University,
It's not hard to find people struggling to find a place to rent in this city.
For the amount that you're paying, it's just really not good conditions, or like there's rats infested in the community in the area, or bed bugs.
There's nothing cheaper than $1,700. It's out of every budget I've ever had. I can't afford any of it.
Everything's so expensive in Toronto.
A big issue, as always, is supply. Today, a new report found that Airbnb has pulled thousands of homes from the rental market.
According to the report, there are 19,255 Airbnb listings in the city of Toronto. The numbers show that 42% would be considered non-compliant under the city of Toronto's short-term housing rules. That's a little more than 8,200. Of those units, it found that 6,500 homes could be added to the city's long-term rental supply, which it claims would double the vacancy rate in the city.
Airbnb should abide by the council rules and delist all the non-compliant host listings today. Just do it.
The City of Toronto voted to restrict short-term rentals to private residences in 2017. Airbnb said it would follow the new rules, but that was appealed by Airbnb hosts and is now up in the air.
Airbnb said from the get-go that they were prepared to work with the City of Toronto and would abide by our rules. So don't play this out in the courts.
It's a relatively sizable number when we look at the size of Toronto's rental market.
When we're talking about affordability, how much of a difference do you see this making if those units that Airbnb is talking about were introduced into the rental market?
Yeah, I mean, a tight vacancy, like a low vacancy rate, can always have an impact on affordability. Over the long term, though, I mean, in addition to regulating Airbnb, we do need to start building a lot more purpose-built rental units. This is a great short-term fix, but long-term we do need more rental units out there.
Airbnb, for its part, dismissed the report and the coalition's ties to the hotel industry's main union, saying this report is based on faulty assumptions and poor research and is yet another example of the well-resourced and clearly biased hotel lobby seeking to villainize families who are making a little extra income by sharing their homes.
Now, Dwight, Airbnb also said in that statement that it wants to be regulated, but of course, as you heard in the story, that appeal is still pending, and that's not slated to be heard until August. So with that, we don't really know what the impetus is for Airbnb to do anything until then, until this appeal is heard on the city's regulations. Dwight.
Thank you, Farah.
Residents of a West End neighborhood say they are sick and tired of having their cars broken into, and now they're ready to take action. I'm Greg Ross. I'll tell you what they're prepared to do to try and stop it. That story is coming up.
Emotions are running high at the General Motors plant in Oshawa as a second day of protests halted work inside the plant. Workers are angry at the company's refusal to reconsider its plans to close operations there. Nearly 3,000 workers will be out of a job at the plant at the end of this year. Stephanie Skinderis has more now from Oshawa.
This morning's protest lasted about an hour and a half. Like yesterday's similar work stoppage, today's was spontaneous, sparked by talks yesterday that didn't go the workers' way. Their union, Unifor, is proposing to keep this GM plant in Oshawa open until at least September of 2020. But GM reaffirmed yesterday that it will be closing at the end of this year. That news left workers feeling betrayed and angry all over again.
We would understand, we wouldn't like it, but we would understand if they were losing money, if the quality was poor, if there was a justified reason. Today, there is no justified reason other than corporate greed. General Motors has made $6 billion in the first 3 quarters. They cannot justify this closure.
GM's Vice President of Corporate Affairs has responded with a statement saying why GM feels it needs to close. He says, "We studied all of the different proposals in detail, some of which we studied in detail before, and they all added substantial incremental cost." Going on to say they would not address the economic situation that we have with the shift in the marketplace. David Patterson also says he understands workers' frustrations, but that at this point, the union needs to be working with GM on supports and transitions for the nearly 3,000 workers who will lose their jobs when this plant closes. GM says it's already offered to pay for retraining and that it's offered to renegotiate workers' contracts on top of what they already get. The union says that's not enough, and it doesn't make up for the fact that this plant is going to close and all those jobs lost along with it. Stephanie Skandaris, CBC News, Oshawa.
You are confident that this is a fight that can be won still at this point?
I am absolutely confident that this is a fight that's going to be won.
Still ahead, I talk one-on-one with the head of Unifor, Jerry Dias. By all accounts, GM isn't going to back down on their decision. So what's next for the union and the workers? That's coming up in less than 10 minutes. Plus, an early morning scare in Mississauga as a chunk of ice falls from the sky and into a sleeping woman's bedroom. We'll bring you that story at 6:30. Mixed bag out there today, Colette. I think I saw some pellets, then blinding snow on the 401, and then half a kilometer later, sunshine.
Yeah, that's right, Dwight. You get into some of those whiteout conditions with some of the squalls coming across the lakes, and some of them really making some distance because of the strength of the winds we've been seeing. Yeah, and then sometimes you're just out there in a bit of sunshine with partly cloudy conditions. So we've got it all. Current temperatures right now, that colder air making its way in. We're sitting at -2 in Toronto, Oshawa at -3, and St. Catharines -1. That's what the thermometer reads. Then we factor in some of these winds. We get our wind chill, and you can see we're talking about some double digits out there in the negatives. Oshawa at -10, Hamilton a cool day there as well, and the sustained winds are roughly in there around 30 to 40 kilometers an hour, but you factor in some of these gusts that we're seeing, so at those times it makes that wind chill even more significant. Even in Toronto, seeing 50 kilometers an hour for some of the wind gusts, and we've had some stronger than that, and we'll continue to get that. You know, not only tonight, tomorrow they're going to back off a tiny bit, but not much. We've got another breezy day ahead of us, so you can see some of the lake effect stuff in between. You get into some clearer conditions. Now for the GTA, we'll see some of these scattered flurries kind of easing off through the later evening and overnight hours and getting into a bit of a clearing trend. -6 overnight tonight. There are those winds continuing tomorrow, even tomorrow afternoon. Do you notice? Yeah, not a change in the temperature, -6. It's going to feel like -14. But it's going to get even cooler than that. We're going to take a look at the trend of our daytime highs coming up over the next 7 days when I return, Dwight.
Okay, I'll get the gloves in the 2 count. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
3 federal by-elections have been called for next month, including one right here in the GTA. Residents of York Simcoe will go to the polls on February 25th. That riding includes the towns of East Gwillimbury and Georgina, part of King Township, the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and parts of Innisfil and Bradford, West Gwillimbury. A by-election will also be held for Burnaby South in British Columbia. That's where federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is running. The 3rd by-election will be held in Outremont, Quebec.
So now I'll be adding these recording electrodes. They're stickers that go to your scalp. I think there is some misconceptions about ECT, and so to allow patients to see it through VR from a first-person perspective, I think can really destigmatize the procedure.
Experiencing shock therapy before the real thing. Sunnybrook is using virtual reality to help destigmatize the treatment and give patients a sense of what they're in for. So, how do they feel about it? We'll let them tell you after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
The federal government has adopted new rules governing the use of drones. Transport Minister Marc Garneau introduced the changes today in Montreal. He says they were motivated in part by safety concerns over drones that were recently spotted near 2 British airports.
It is a serious criminal offense to interfere with the operations of an airport, and even more, to cause risk to aircraft carrying passengers that are either landing or taking off. So it's a very serious crime, which is subject to not only a fine, but also imprisonment.
Under the new rules, all drones must be registered, all operators must pass an online exam and be certified. Owners must be at least 14 years old. All drones are banned from flying higher than 122 meters or within 5.6 kilometers of an airport. The new rules come into effect on June 1st. Having surgery or undergoing medical treatment can be a scary experience, especially when that treatment has a name like electroconvulsive therapy, also known as shock therapy. Doctors at Sunnybrook say the treatment for depression is misunderstood and stigmatized, so, as Taylor Simmons shows us, they're offering patients a virtual look at how it works.
So now I'll be adding these recording electrodes to your scalp.
The equipment, the doctors, even the sounds of the procedure room, all captured on this camera and available to patients through a 360-degree experience.
And the whole point is to alleviate their anxiety and misconceptions about the procedure, as well through patient education.
Doctors here are mimicking what would happen during electroconvulsive therapy, a procedure used for some patients with depression. They're explaining their every move so patients can understand how it works.
This is a painless, safe procedure that's likely going to improve their mental health condition within a few weeks. I think there is some misconceptions about ECT, and so to allow patients to see it through VR from a first-person perspective, I think can really destigmatize the procedure.
So I'm going to wrap this around your arm to monitor your blood pressure.
The virtual simulations are part of Sunnybrook's newest VR study, looking at whether virtual reality is more effective at educating and easing anxiety in patients than two-dimensional videos or pamphlets. Dr. Fahad Alam started creating the immersive experiences a few years ago to reduce anxiety in the operating room.
It's been shown to increase wound infections, it's been shown to increase length of stay. It's been associated with mortality or death in the cardiac surgery population. So anxiety is not a benign thing in itself. And when you have a vulnerable population like this, it can be compounded.
Laura Victoria Perez participated in Alam's first VR study, looking at preoperative anxiety before her hysterectomy.
I was really nervous because it was the first surgery I ever had.
After seeing the procedure room, the steps, how they'd insert the IV.
Don't think I have the words to explain how calming it is to see what's going to happen before it happens. I was quite curious and excited like a little kid because I wanted to see if it was the same thing.
The videos are all part of a bank of VR experiences Alam wants to release in the future, from training exercises for staff to experiencing waking up from anesthetic.
You're going to see me inject some medications through your IV.
If successful, the ECT video will also be added.
The end product will be a video patients can watch through this Google Cardboard headset at home or through this headset here at the hospital.
We know that many of our patients are very interested in incorporating technology into their care, and this is a very unique way of being able to have them experience what it's like to run through an ECT treatment.
Hi, how you doing? So you're waking up in the recovery room, ECT is over, everything's fine.
The study will begin next month, testing the simulations on about 200 patients over the next year. Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Toronto.
A lot has happened since our last NPR in October. For one thing, the U.S.-led trade war is beginning to have negative economic consequences.
1.75% after 5 raises in the last year and a bit, the Bank of Canada keeps its lending rate steady. Dan Buckner will join us a little later with more, including if Canadians should be concerned. That's coming up at 6:30.
Brothers and sisters, I want to thank you for sticking together. I want to thank
A sit-in yesterday and more demonstrations today at the General Motors plant in Oshawa as employees protest the company's decision to shut down the plant by the end of this year. The union is fighting back, but GM is not budging. I spoke to the president of Unifor, Jerry Dias, to see what their next steps are and why he says this is all about greed.
When you talk about greed, that's all this is all about. Their decision to close Oshawa makes absolutely no sense. Here, Canadians, we were there 10 years ago when General Motors was in bankruptcy. Yeah, we gave General Motors $11 billion.
But they feel like they've paid all of it back. They did everything they were said they were asked to do as part of that deal, and they don't owe us anything, it seems. That's the feeling.
What they do owe. Canadian consumers buy over 300,000 General Motors vehicles a year.
Yes.
Right now, we build a little over 300,000 General Motors vehicles a year. So when GM says, listen, we build where we sell, they're disingenuous because Mexican consumers buy about 230,000, 240,000 GM vehicles a year, yet they're on the cusp of building over 1 million GM vehicles. So why are they doing it? Because they pay their workers $2 an hour in the assembly plants. So that's all this is about. It's about appeasing Wall Street, it's about their stock prices, and of course it's about making sure that the senior executives at General Motors continue to receive their outrageous paychecks.
GM is saying this is a done deal. You're saying you are not accepting this. What's next in the fight then to keep the production going?
Well, first of all, we have a mass demonstration in Windsor on Friday. It'll be on the Canadian side of the border, of course, with the General Motors building in the backdrop. Canadians are already punishing General Motors, so they have a decision to make. Everybody sees this for what it is. They're not fooling anybody. Where do they accept the closures? Where do they announce? 1 in Canada, 4 in the United States. But they don't say that 90% of all of their global profits come from Canada and the United States. So they're penalizing the countries that generate all of their profits. And people are seeing that, people are furious about it, and people are reacting. And I know they're mad in the United States as well.
The fear, I guess, is for the workers here in Oshawa that they're getting a sense of false hope, that this is a fight that can be won.
First of all, it is a fight that's going to be won. This isn't a question of false hope. This is about us making a principled stand, and we're going to fight to the bitter end. Listen, a lot of the politicians may have thrown in the towel. We're not throwing in the towel. So General Motors is going to have to make a decision. This is going to be a very terrible 2019 for General Motors as we continue to talk about their lack of ethics, as we talk about the bailout, as we talk about what Canadians have done for them. So they're going to have to explain why they'll close our assembly plant in Oshawa and are quite proud of the fact that they pay their employees $2 an hour in Mexico. So that's what this is about. Can you imagine? One CEO makes more money than every single employee they have in the Ramos assembly plant in Mexico. That itself should be a crime.
Let's talk about transition. If this fight is not won, Jerry, is Unifor then helping these workers then transition into other roles of employment, other jobs?
Our preoccupation is with keeping the assembly plant open. It's not just our 2,500 members in Oshawa. We have another 2,500 members in the supply base. This has taken $1 billion a year out of the Ontario economy. So this is going to affect all of us. Where does the $1 billion every year, what does it do? Education, health care, infrastructure.
There's a lot of things connected to this.
So look, this just isn't a fight about our members in Oshawa. This is General Motors is frankly taking on all of Canada, and we're not accepting their decision.
So right now, that is the total focus. We're not talking about trying to retrain and get people into other jobs because these jobs are going to not be there. You are confident that this is a fight that can be won still at this point?
I am absolutely confident that this is a fight that's going to be won. Look, this is a big deal. This is a big deal for the economy of Canada, and our members expect that we're going to fight on their behalf. So this is a fight that has to be won, because if General Motors can just up and leave after 100 years and there's no penalty to pay, well then I guess the other employers in the auto industry will see that there's no negative reaction from governments and they would feel emboldened to do the same thing, and we're just not there.
That's a scary precedent to set. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'm Natalie Nanowski. A woman from this Mississauga home had a rude awakening this morning when a piece of ice pierced through her roof, nearly hitting her. I'll have that story coming up.
The safety of clothing donation bins is under the microscope after a woman was found stuck in one yesterday morning. She died. Toronto's mayor has called for a review, and as Ali Chiasson explains, one manufacturer of the bins is also trying to make them safer.
So I'm at Rangeview Fabricating here in Hamilton. The bin that Crystal died in yesterday was manufactured here. Less than 48 hours after her death, Rangeview sent a tutorial urging their charity partners to disconnect the anti-theft flap. They invited us inside to show us how they're trying to take the lead in the industry and change it. How do you feel when you hear about it and you find out, ugh, it was ours?
Yeah, it's puts a lump in your throat. The only thing you can do is do the best you can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And then once we can take care of ourselves, then we can look at other manufacturers and other companies, and hopefully they'll follow suit.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the bins that still has the bars here. Can you show us what the other ones look like when that's removed?
Sure.
Okay.
So once the bar is removed, now the other thing we've done is, even though there's no linkages, we've also talked to the industry. And a warning label doesn't mean anything if somebody's trying to get in there.
Yeah.
But we're putting them on there anyways.
Now without the bars, it's just
without the bars, it's just a flap that hangs, keeps the weather out a little bit.
When you consider how many bins there are and how long they've been around.
Well, we went 20 years without an incident, right? And so you think everything's great. And you don't have a reason to suspect that there's a potential of injury or anything like that. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and something happens, and then that causes you to go back and say, we have to look at everything again. The goals and aims and the hearts of the industry is to help other people in the first place. So, you'd be hypocritical if you didn't
mitigate the risk. So far, we know that the charity Children's Wish is in the process of dismantling all of the anti-theft guards in their bins, but we know that there are thousands more of that make and model across Canada right now. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Hamilton.
Police are investigating dozens of car break-ins that have been happening near St. Clair and Bathurst. Residents in the area say it's happening almost daily, no matter what they do. Greg Ross joins us live now from the neighborhood. And Greg, police have made an arrest, but the break-ins are still happening.
That's right. Police have arrested 45-year-old Ronald Young of Toronto. He's facing 3 charges, and residents tell me that those break-ins are still happening. They say it often happens while they're parked on residential streets like these cars here behind me. Now, I did speak with an officer from 13 Division today. He tells me that it's possible there are several people who are responsible for these break-ins, and he says that police are continuing to investigate.
The community is definitely on high alert.
Mark Vendramini says he was about to head into work a few weeks ago when he realized his car had been broken into while parked in the laneway behind his house.
And I looked in from the other side and I saw everything spewed on both my seats.
He says after smashing his passenger window, the thieves rifled through his glove box and center console.
At the end of the day, what did they get away with? Some change. I don't know what they saw that interested them. They ended up getting away with about $1.75 in change.
It cost Vendramini $450 in repairs. Several of Vendramini's neighbors have made similar complaints to police, which led to the arrest of a 45-year-old man last Friday. Residents tell us that the break-ins have continued even after the arrest, and fresh piles of broken glass from car windows like this one can be found throughout the area.
That happened on Friday night. My sister's car was broken into on Saturday night. So there's definitely more than one person involved.
People are sick of it, they're scared, and they want some answers.
Ward 12 City Councillor Josh Matlow has been fielding complaints from several residents. Now he's ready to take action, calling for a public meeting between members of the community and police.
But I think it's time for the police to come out to the community, discuss what they're able to share about the investigation, but also what people can do to both protect themselves, but also to responsibly contribute to the police's investigation.
One woman tried posting this sign in her window saying there was nothing of value in the car, then posted this picture to a community Facebook group. Another man created a map that shows where dozens of these break-ins are alleged to have taken place. Councillor Matlow plans to use it at his public meeting.
So that I can put it right in front of the unit commander of 13 Division.
And Matlow tells me he did speak with that unit commander on the phone recently. They're going to be meeting in the next couple of days, and that's when they plan to set a date for this public meeting. At this point, they're not sure what will be on the agenda, but that is the plan moving forward. They're hoping to have that public meeting in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks.
Yeah, certainly frustrating for those area residents. Thank you, Greg. A Mississauga family had a surprise in their home this morning when ice barreled through their bedroom ceiling. Natalie Lanowski joins us live now from the home. And Natalie, you spoke to the family.
That's right. And the mother told me that the ice fell through the ceiling, landed right in her walk-in closet. And that's only about a meter or so away from her bed. So it really could have hit her when she was sleeping if it was just a few feet over to the right. She told me that this all happened at about 6:30 in the morning. She heard a loud bang. And to her, she says it sounded as though all the shelving in her closet had been destroyed.
At first, I thought it was maybe raccoon that damaged the attic, and I was scared, like maybe they're gonna jump on me. But then my younger son came, and he looked at it, and we started picking up ice. Where this ice could come, because we didn't have a storm. There was nothing broken that it could have built up, and there's no wind.
So after examining it, she says it likely isn't hail. Her and her family believe that the likely culprit in all of this is a plane. They say that they do hear planes fly over quite often. And the whole piece of ice, when you put it together, although it is broken into pieces right now, it is about the size of a volleyball, and it weighs nearly 5 pounds. It caused a lot of damage, going through about 2 pieces of plywood, some drywall. So if it did hit someone when they were asleep, it could have been deadly. Dwight?
Yeah, we've covered stories like this before where things fell from planes into people's homes. So what is the airport saying about this, Natalie?
So we reached out to the Greater Toronto Airport Authority, and they told us that they're sorry to hear that this happened, and they're glad that everyone is okay, but they told us that they're not investigating, and neither are police, because police tell us that this isn't criminal, so they really can't do anything about it. We did reach out to Transport Canada, and they told us that they haven't received a complaint yet, but they are urging the family to send one in so that they can investigate if it does go to that. We also spoke with just about an hour ago to the Canadian Federation of Pilots. Pilot there told us that incidents like this do happen. He reminded me of one just a few years ago in Mississauga when some fecal matter fell from a plane and into a pool at a family home there. He says that this does happen sometimes when there are leaks at the lavatory, but he says in this case, because the ice is clear and not blue, that it likely didn't come from a lavatory. It came from another part of the plane. All that being said, though, the family here says that they're lucky to be alive, and they feel like Lady Luck is on their side right now, so they are going to play the lottery. Dwight?
Well, it had to come from somewhere, so hopefully they get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Natalie.
After more than a month in Kenya, a Toronto blogger and new dad is finally back on Canadian soil with his newborn twins. I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up, we'll tell you about the journey he's been on to try to get these babies Canadian citizenships.
Key figures from both the Democratic and Republican parties met with President Donald Trump at the White House today. It was the latest effort to find a way to end the partial government shutdown. The main sticking point is the president's demand for a spending bill that includes funding for a border wall. Ellen Morrow now with more from Washington.
An end to the shutdown happening anytime soon is appearing less and less likely. Today's meeting at the White House between the president and Democratic leaders accomplished nothing. In fact, it seems to have made the situation worse, with President Trump leaving the table and walking out of the room when Democrats said they would not agree to funding for his promised border wall with Mexico. Here's how Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate, described the meeting.
He asked Speaker Pelosi, will you agree to my wall? She said no. And he just got up and said, then we have nothing to discuss, and he just walked out. Again, we saw a temper tantrum.
Trump himself referred to the meeting as a total waste of time, and Republicans are accusing the Democrats of refusing to negotiate. Here's Vice President Mike Pence.
Today, in this brief meeting, we heard once again that Democratic leaders are unwilling to even negotiate to resolve this partial government shutdown or address the crisis at our southern border.
So on the 19th day of this partial government shutdown, there's no end in sight, with both sides digging in. All the while, tens of thousands of federal workers are facing lost pay and uncertainty as this drags on. Which side will blink first? Some Republicans have voiced their frustration with the ongoing shutdown, with one congressman calling it an idiocy cycle. But will any of them join ranks with the Democrats to support opening the government, regardless of whether or not there is funding given to the border wall Trump promised on the campaign trail that Mexico was going to pay for? Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
The Bank of Canada has announced it is holding the line on its benchmark interest rate.
Bond yields have fallen, yield curves have flattened even more, stock markets have repriced significantly.
The key lending rate remains at 1.75%. The decision comes amid concerns about the slump in oil prices and global trade uncertainty. The Bank of Canada has raised its key rate 5 times since the summer of 2017, raising the interest rate in an attempt to keep inflation in an acceptable range. Dan Buckner joins us now to explain the decision. And Dan, there were a lot of indicators that said rates would be rising.
Yes, you're absolutely right. As recently as just a few weeks ago, a lot of economists and analysts were saying we could expect to see even 3 increases in the rate this year because the economy was looking so good. I mean, you remember the reason why rates were so low for almost 10 years, Dwight, was after the financial crisis of 2008. Central banks all over the world, including Canada, wanted money to be cheap so that consumers would borrow and spend and businesses would borrow and spend, and we keep the economy going and, you know, keep things on track. But as you say, from the summer of 2017, they said, okay, financial crisis is in the history books, recovery is solid, time to get rates back to normal. And that's what we've seen happening over the last little while. But guess what? Just over the last little bit, we've seen a lot of negative indicators coming, and voila, the scene has changed, and now people are even saying we could see another cut this year.
Let's talk about some of those negative indicators. What are we looking at?
Well, definitely, as you mentioned in the introduction, the price of oil.
Yes.
It's fallen 25% just since the fall, so much so that the Bank of Canada has said, you know what, the whole Canadian economy, we thought it was going to grow at 2.1% this year. We're scaling that back to 1.7%. So that's a big deal. The other thing, of course, is housing. The Canadian Real Estate Association thinks home sales are going to be at their lowest level in a decade this year. And then, of course, the trade tensions between China and the U.S., we're sort of in the middle of that. So all of that added up to the Bank of Canada saying, nope, maybe this isn't the time to be raising interest rates. So all of us with mortgages or lines of credit or debt, we can all breathe a sigh of relief today.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Dwight.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets close today. Stay with us. We will be right back.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Over winter weather, Colette. We're here in Toronto. We want some real temperatures out there.
What do you mean by real?
Minus.
Well,
Negatives.
Okay, well then here we go. Let's get into it because that's what we're looking at. You know, it's January, it's going to feel like January. Arctic air moving in. This is the temperature trend for the next 7 days of the daytime highs, so generally coming in the afternoon hours. Look at what we're looking at. This is what we have to handle, some real temperatures. -6, -7, -6, -7. It's not till about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that we're going to see as we get into next week. So we've got to get through the weekend where we're going to see these much cooler temperatures, although it's just because of the comparison, right, to how mild it was yesterday that it's kind of harder to take. These are the readings out there right now, but we know we've got some stronger winds, so it feels actually like -8. That's for Toronto. It feels like -10 for those of you watching us from Hamilton. Same thing in Oshawa. The wind gusts have been significant today. So even the sustained winds have been 30 to 40 kilometers an hour, but those gusts have been more like 50 to 60. And those winds are going to stick with us even into tomorrow. They're only going to ease up a little bit, so still a breezy day. They've been driving some of the snow squalls and some of those light snows at time, making their way, or wet flurries, into the GTA. That'll start to back off a little bit as the winds change direction, but over towards London, areas further west from there, you're still going to get into some nasty driving conditions tonight if you're headed in that direction, or again watching from there. Otherwise, it's kind of a bit of a clearing trend in terms of the flurries moving out overnight tonight for the GTA, and then we get into kind of a mix of sun and cloud as we head through the day tomorrow. But look, these are the wind gusts taking you through the day tomorrow, so they're still going to be strong and still generally from that northwesterly direction, so that's why it's so chilly. Overnight tonight, our lows -5 to -8. In Markham, it will feel more like about -12 to -15 tomorrow morning with the wind chill. Tomorrow afternoon, winds just coming down about 5 kilometers, still very, very gusty. And these are, look at this, the temperatures even in the afternoon really don't change. So they're almost going to be steady through the day on the cool side. Thursday night into Friday morning, -12 for the low. This time of year around -10 is seasonal, but it's going to feel like -20 Friday morning. What we do get, what's nice, is quite a bit of sunshine coming in on Friday, chance for some flurries into Saturday, but those temperatures, especially those overnight lows, staying very cool, so the wind chills in the morning around -20 for a few days yet to come there, Dwight.
Oh, it's about time.
Oh, it's real stuff.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Break. Their dad is Canadian, but 2 newborn baby girls are still waiting on their Canadian citizenship. We have a pretty unique family to introduce you to, and they just got back from Kenya. Stay with us.
I want to just spend time with my babies, not worry about legal stuff and not worry about going to embassies and lawyers and courts, and I just want to be home. I want to be home.
Happy, healthy, and home at long last. A sigh of relief from a dad and his newborn baby girls today as they touched down on Canadian soil. It was a 36-hour-long trip to get here, but that ordeal pales in comparison to all that came before it. Joseph Tito, who is from Toronto, was left in a lurch in Kenya when his babies were born through surrogacy. After learning about a new immigration law, it meant his daughters would not automatically become Canadian citizens like he thought they would. Talia Ritchie is live tonight out at Pearson Airport. And Talia, for most Canadians, that would be the case, but not for this new dad.
That's right, Dwight, and that's because of where he was born, not the babies. Joseph says the twins still aren't officially Canadian citizens yet, but their sponsorship packages are done, and now he's just hoping that this process will be expedited. But in the meantime, he says he's just relieved that he can continue sharing this journey of single fatherhood, but now from the comfort of his own home.
Twins.
From finding out the big news to selecting the perfect stroller for two, Toronto blogger and new dad Joseph Tito has taken thousands of people on his journey through single fatherhood.
I'm just so happy that they're together and we're here and we're home.
Including a major roadblock. Tito says he was shocked to learn that because he was born in Italy, his new babies Stella and Mia would not so easily slide into Canadian citizenship.
Before I even started this journey, I looked into it. I contacted the embassy, I contacted my clinic, I contacted lawyers. I did all my research, and then I paid for everything 3 weeks before that, and then all of a sudden it was, okay, well, you can't go. So I was just floored.
An amendment was made to the Citizen Act in 2015 that says a baby born outside of Canada to a Canadian citizen automatically receives citizenship status. But this ends after the first generation.
I think it felt like a movie. I didn't think it was real.
As a self-proclaimed details-oriented man, Tito says he was on top of all of his paperwork and was blindsided by this law. Now he's hoping his story will help other parents going through the process and hopes to see the law changed.
I understand why it was put into place, but I think it needs to be amended for a lot of people that live in Canada.
But for now, he has some pretty important tasks to tend to.
Feed them, bathe them in fresh water, and put them to bed in their nursery.
Now, earlier I spoke with an immigration lawyer on the phone, and he says he actually hasn't come across too many clients with this specific issue, but that partly could be because this law actually only affects people who were born after February 14th, 1977. But still, he says as more cases like this occur, there is a greater likelihood that this law could be changed. Now, CBC Toronto did reach out to Canadian Immigration to see if they were considering changing this law, but we didn't receive a response. Dwight?
Thank you, Talia. After the break, this little dog was lost in downtown Toronto. Its owner extremely worried, but then she took her search to social media. How Prince the pup was found next.
The GTA is a big place. 6 million lives intersecting. News is constantly breaking every minute of every day. CBC Toronto News at 11 brings it all together.
Welcome to your Toronto newsroom.
This is a pick of the day. It's a good one, too, sent by Penwen Lin. Harbourfront Centre skating, showing us our GTA down by the harbourfront. Get us your photos by posting them on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag CBC or GTA. We will air some of them on the show. Your pup goes missing downtown. Where do you go for help? Social media, of course. On Monday, Katie Peary took her dog Prince out for his daily walk and ended up at a store on Queen Street. She tied her pup outside and kept an eye on him while she was in the store for less than a minute. Someone had blocked her view, and it was enough time for someone to steal the 9-year-old Pomeranian Chihuahua mix. Peary panicked when she realized what had happened and called police. A friendly stranger even printed off flyers to help her track down the little pooch, but it was her decision to ask friends to post pictures of Prince on social media that led to the tips pouring in.
Was getting tips and phone calls and messages about people that had seen Prince with mails going throughout the city. Somebody sent me photos where he was spotted. And then we didn't know which way from there because they said that it would look like he was going to either east or west. So we were following every single time that we got a tip. We went to that location. We waited there for a bit until we got something else. Finally, I got another phone call saying that he was spotted at the Toronto Eaton Centre. We were always kind of like a few minutes behind him, but eventually the timing aligned and everything worked out for the better.
That's just incredible. Real-time chase after a tense 10-hour saga. Peary got a phone call from someone saying they ended up with Prince. She met up with them, and she got her pup back, and they've been cuddling ever since.
Oh.
I know you love this one.
I know. I was going to walk away if it wasn't going to be a happy ending. I'm like, I can't listen to it.
This is the newsroom's #1 dog lover right here. So.
And they're so cute, right? And I think about that with my dog. So cute. Like,
even I have to admit that that's a really cute one.
Yeah,
okay, you got me on that one.
Weather's not so cute, though, huh?
No, not at all.
Not really. We do have some very cold air that is moving in. I mean, you probably already started to feel it with those winds that have been coming in here from the northwest and very gusty at times, so giving us a wind chill. But overnight tonight, we go down to -6. Okay, seasonal this time of year is -10, so let's just keep that in perspective. However, look at how the temperature doesn't change through the day tomorrow. -6 even for the afternoon high. Ooh. So we just kind of stay there. The wind's still almost as strong as today, so actually it's going to feel -14, that'll be the wind chill, and then it's going to be on Friday morning where we're going to have that wind chill around -20, so kind of the core of that coldest air will be moving in here.
Perfect weather to cuddle with your pup.
That is right. Maybe that's what I'll be doing.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you for watching. Colin and I will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great evening, everybody.